Welcome to the new Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news on the local Colorado economy and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host, Chris Gorog, brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. Chris is personable and opens up with our guests on issues we all would like to see addressed. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's new Cyber Frontier.
Hello, this is Abe Thompson coming to you from the Secure Set Studios here in Colorado Springs for the new Cyber Frontier. Today's special guest with us is Adriel Desautels. Did I get that right?
Pretty close. Desautels.
Desautels. Lovely. Well, glad to have you with us. Adriel is the founder and CEO of the penetration testing company Netragard. I'm sure many of you have heard a bit about them. Also was very much involved in bringing on the Snowsoft research team and the work that he's done there. So Adriel, it's a delight to have you with us.
That's my pleasure as well. Thank you.
Outstanding. So coming to us from the East Coast, I hope you're all set and getting ready for Christmas.
We are. We finally got snow. It melted. It came back. So we'll see how that goes.
Excellent. So tell us, how did you kind of end up where you are today in terms of sort of your journey into the industry and how you've developed this passion?
Yeah. When I was about 7 years old, my dad got a computer. It was a Tandy, of all things.
Woohoo!
And yeah, right. And I was just sort of intrigued. I was curious of how it worked. And that curiosity, drove me into, learning how the little man in Load Runner ran back and forth and understanding code. And my curiosity from code kind of exploded when I discovered the modem, the modulator demodulator.
Yes.
And found that I could connect to other people's computer systems, and then found that using code I could do other things, and it just sort of exploded out through there. Carried me all the way through college up until, I founded my first company, which was the company that actually established Snowsoft. It was Secure Network Operations, and
yes.
Moved from that company to Netragard, and here we are today.
Well, and you've made quite a splash. Now it's interesting too when you think back to the speed of data movement back in those days on the modem, and it must have taken you a lot of patience. But a mixture of curiosity, I'm sure, to get there.
Yeah, it was. There was patience. Of course, there were stability issues. So you might be in the middle of doing something and you get knocked offline. And then in some cases, there were adversaries that were deliberately knocking you offline.
Of course,
yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, yeah. It was fun. I mean, I think it was just fun because it was totally new, and
right.
it was creative and exciting. Yeah. And
it was a proving ground, right?
It certainly was, yeah, absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about Snow, and then even a little bit more about Netragard.
Yeah, so Snow, or Secure Network Operations, was established in around 1998, if I recall. And I really founded the company because I learned early on that I didn't quite like working for other people. Right? And I knew that my skill set was something that people wanted, only because people are always asking for help with certain things. And so the company came together. It acted primarily as a research company. We did a lot of research against various pieces of software and technology. Some was paid, some was designed for public release. Most notable was the research that we did against HP's, True 64 operating system.
Sure.
And that, that kind of made waves in the industry. Shortly after Snow was sold and the rest of it was dissolved, we were almost forced into building Netragard. So we had a former client that had approached us, and they said, "Hey, we're looking for a pen testing firm that will take a realistic approach to penetration testing."
Sure.
And we've had a hard time finding one. And I said, "All right, we don't really, do penetration testing right now, but let us." And we weren't even established, so we didn't
Sure.
exist. So I said, let us, and our team, the people that I had, see if we can't find somebody. And so we scoured the web, and we found that, at least the ones that we talked to, the pen testing vendors that we talked to, they all promised that they would deliver a manual service. They all promised it would be a research-driven service. But when it came down to the nitty-gritty, their process was always the same. It was, we're going to run a vulnerability scan, and we're going to vet the results. We'll call that act of vetting and exploiting the results manual testing, and then we'll produce a report. And anybody that knows much about vulnerability scanners knows that they leave a lot to be desired. I mean, they have a very high rate of false positives and false negatives. And so that's exactly what our client, turned into our client, wasn't looking for. And so they pushed us and they said, hey, why don't you take your, research methodology and why don't you use that to test us? And I remember thinking, okay, that's an interesting concept, but that's kind of what the bad guys do, right? They target an infrastructure, they collect intelligence, they do research, they write exploits, they penetrate. And so we took our research methodology and we augmented it. We since have named it real-time dynamic testing. But we took that and we applied it towards network penetration testing. Within the first 4 minutes of using this methodology for the engagement, we ended up picking up the first one as Netragard. We managed to breach our client's infrastructure and compromise their domain.
Wow.
Just in a 4-minute window.
Cyber Resilience Institute helps build strong cyber communities designed to prevent members from attack. Like building a neighborhood watch, it takes coordination and a sharing community to protect our identities and valuables in the virtual world. Typically, we hear that organizations know they need to do something to protect their cyber assets, but don't know where to begin. Let Cyber Resilience Institute help your community create an action plan. Cyber Resilience Institute will build your community or business marketplace so that it is designed to support a collective cyber defense. Contact them for more information at cyberresilienceinstitute.org.
And I kind of sat back and I thought, wow, that was really fast, to get into a domain. And I did a quick, really quick post-mortem trying to figure out why it was so easy. And it turned out, that the reason why it was easy was the other vendors that they'd had doing testing were doing very active work. They were using vulnerability scanners. They were using very noisy port scanners. And when they looked at our client's infrastructure, their infrastructure reacted and blocked IPs and prevented access to certain services, like their WAF prevented access to the web application that we actually ended up getting into quickly and used that to breach, right? And so the real difference in this case was our methodology was very quiet. We only launched package, only sent traffic when we actually intended to attack something. Everything else was as passive as we could possibly do it. And so that's how we got in. We got in because we didn't depend on automation. And then since then, that client, they were impressed with the service. We were kind of impressed actually ourselves.
Rightly so. Yeah.
Right. So since then, they were impressed with our service. And we continued to grow. People just came to us through word of mouth. In about 2009, we started doing more advertising on Google AdWords and things like that. That has been our primary source for revenue. We've been in various different papers, Bloomberg, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, you name it, for the work that we've done. That kind of helps. In about 2014, 2015, we thought, well, right now we're only delivering this really high threat, what we call realistic threat penetration testing. We should probably deliver 2 other services. We broke out 2 other service levels. One is designed to really satisfy, the people who need a check in the box, right? Satisfy third-party needs. And we're very candid about what it is, what it means from a security perspective. The second tier of service is designed to, satisfy the check in the box, but provide the research-based approach as opposed to the industry standard approach to penetration testing. That second tier is ideally used for, technological targets, web applications, even, hardware and reverse engineering and things like that. And then the third tier of service is, it's our flagship product. It's our realistic threat penetration testing service.
Sure, legitimate red teaming.
Yeah. So, even the term red teaming, one of the things that we found in the industry, people use the word penetration test and vulnerability assessment interchangeably, and they mean 2 different things.
Absolutely.
And we found that even in the context of red teaming, Not all vendors use that term properly. And so, yes, what we call it a platinum level of service, but
Sure.
the platinum level of service, yes, it is what red teaming is supposed to be.
Correct.
But it operates at a level of threat that is ideally slightly higher than realistic. So we measure a threat in terms of minutes, right? How many minutes is an attacker going to spend going after an individual parameter or a single point, a potential point of entry in an infrastructure? And so if we find that an attacker is going to spend 100 minutes going after something, then we're going to operate at between 103 and 105 minutes. And the philosophy there is, it's the same as like the V0 and the V90 standards for ballistic testing. If you're going to be testing armor, you don't just want to test it against the minimal threat.
Right.
You want to test it against a higher level of threat. And of course, you also don't want to be testing, armor against a nuke unless that's a scenario that is going to be used to, protect them. So
because there is a bottom line. There's a bottom line in there somewhere financially, right? So you have to kind of match.
Yeah, and so that actually kind of leads into one of the big issues that we found with our industry is that most vendors that we've seen that deliver the same services don't test really within any realistic threat context. They sort of test to find vulnerabilities. They don't test to really expose their clients to a realistic level of threat.
Sure.
And that can be problematic. So we try really hard to focus on doing it the real way, which surprises people, but it yields really good results.
Yeah, ask our friends at Coalfire about that surprise.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That is a watershed interesting scenario. I'm stunned still.
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of what had happened, and from what I understand, there were things that the Coalfire engineers just didn't do right.
Sure.
With regards to sticking the scope of work, but even with that aside, they were hired to deliver a penetration test, and they don't deserve what they're doing.
No, and they were protected, in doing that. But and I would imagine that no military commander would be satisfied with only throwing half of the adversary's capability at the problem to test vulnerabilities. So I appreciate sort of the emphasis that you're placing, raising the game so that we can train how we might actually fight. So sort of because of that semantic problem out there, red team, vulnerabilities, true penetration testing, it's interesting. You highlight some of this, and they wrote this interesting biography there in Gizmodo. See if I get this right. Snake oil salesmen plague this security industry, but not everyone is staying quiet. Tell us a little bit about what they pulled out in that little biography.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll probably go off topic when I talk about this, but
right.
I get really frustrated when I hear claims, from technology vendors or anybody in the security industry that are partial claims or partially realistic. I mean,
right.
For example, and my favorite things to pick on, antivirus solutions will protect you from malware and infections. Well, if it really worked, we wouldn't be getting infected anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I do remember back in 2011, we compromised all of the assets using a specific antivirus technology because there was a vulnerability in that technology. We wrote an exploit for it. So, intrusion prevention systems, they don't prevent intrusions.
Right.
Maybe they prevent some intrusions. So what's frustrating to me is, you have clients, the people that hire us, that trust us, and our job is to be clear with them, to be honest with them, and we sell them these things that we call solutions that aren't complete solutions, and we inadvertently promote a false sense of security, and so they end up, feeling safe, and then the bad guys come along using very real methods of attack, and they entirely subvert these solutions. They have no alarms, no awareness, no nothing. That's part of the reason why today I think it was 190 days till somebody is able to detect they've been breached and report it, right?
On average, right? Isn't that on average, something like that?
Yeah, and I can't blame, I can partially blame some of the entities. There are some that have been really terrible at what they've done, but I can't blame most of them. I think that the majority of people who suffer a breach, maybe not even the majority, some number, let's just say, of people who suffer a breach, or organizations rather who suffer a breach, they're not aware that they've been breached because they're trusting their technology to alert them.
Right.
We're working with a client right now. They're a great customer. They've been around for a while. They've been one of our multi-year customers, and they have state-of-the-art, EDR solutions deployed and other things, and they are great at detecting the things that are known, right? So known vulnerabilities, known methods of exploitation. But when we use our unknown methods, which is what we do at our platinum level, our higher tier of service, they just don't see us coming. And we successfully, repeatedly compromise the entire infrastructure from the vantage point of an external threat, bypassing their technology just because we know what their technology is looking for.
Murray Security Services are your cybersecurity experts with decades of experience providing professional training services for our clients in various industries. We offer professional training and certification in areas of cybersecurity, safety, health, and environmental services at our academy. Our in-person and online training provides a collaborative environment where students can interact directly with instructors through live chats or in private classrooms. Visit murraysecurityservices.com for more information.
One of the things that I've called up before, and I've said before, it's almost as if the security industry is defeating the security industry, because you have the solution providers who build these intrusion prevention solutions and these execution prevention technologies and so on and so forth. And some of them are better than others. There's some that I actually like. And then you have the offensive companies that are delivering services like what Netragard is delivering, like penetration testing services, both using commercial off-the-shelf technology, Metasploit, and so on.
Right.
These defensive companies are fully well aware of all of the attacks in the arsenal for these commercial off-the-shelf tools. So of course they're going to have protections or methods of detection in place to defeat, these industry standard penetration testing, attacks. But then when you come in as a bad guy and you create something new, whether it be a 0-day or just, a new method of subverting something, their technology seemed to fail, right? So really what's happening, as far as we can tell anyways, is you have the industry defeating itself. You have people being tested by people, who are using commercial off-the-shelf technologies that are going to be defeated by commercial off-the-shelf technologies. And then the client ends up getting this sense of security that's great. And the bad guys come in and wreak havoc, and the client has no idea.
Sure.
Right.
Well,
so
you've highlighted a fundamental, call to action for our industry, because as you've kind of indicated, we're already out there supposedly presenting ourselves as those who would defend the vulnerable. And
right.
In the midst of that, whether intentionally or less intentionally, we're taking advantage of the vulnerable even further. That's probably where that snake oil salesman picture comes from.
Yeah, it does, and I mean it very very deliberately for a large portion of the industry.
Sure.
And I think they are deliberately and knowingly and willfully taking advantage. The reason why I say that, the most recent thing. So I've encountered this several times. But I remember I was speaking with my partner Philippe about zero-day exploitation and penetration testing and things like that, and I brought up the idea of marketing solutions as complete solutions when in fact they weren't, when in fact they were partial. And it turned out there was a vendor in the audience, and one of the sales reps stood up and he said, I really appreciate what you're saying, and I understand it to be true. But how are we supposed to sell this to our clients if we can't tell them that it's a complete solution? If I go and say, well, it's going to detect 80% or 20% of the things you throw at me, they're not going to buy it. And my response to him was, well, if it can be destroyed by the truth, it should be, which is
Yes.
attributed to Carl Sagan, but it actually isn't, right? So I said, well, tell them the truth, and if it doesn't work, don't sell it. Because by selling that kind of thing and providing that false sense of security, you're actually putting people at increased risk that are trusting you. Yeah. And it's important for us to remember our clients are not experts at breaching networks and defending networks and writing 0 days and social engineering and all that, just like we are not experts at what they do.
Correct.
I mean, if you ask me to manage a network and be an IT guy, I don't think I could do that properly.
Sure.
Even in that respect. Yeah.
And imagine the uproar if doctors were indicating that you need an amputation that you don't need, or selling you, and we know it happens, and it gets certainly a lot of attention in other industries. The pharmaceuticals. Do we really need all of the medicine and the drugs that were being sold and that doctors are recommending? Are all these things legitimate? I think certainly the potential issue exists here in our industry. So other than calling everyone to a moment of truth, what's a way in which we can police this inside our industry?
I'm not sure. I mean, I've thought about this in so many different ways, and I thought, well, we could regulate things, and we could maybe have like a license to be able to provide certain classes of security solutions. But just on my own experience, even in just debating the Wassenaar arrangement, regulations may not be the way because the regulators don't really understand the little nuances and intricacies that they're going to impact, right? So if you regulate this, then you might be taking the teeth away from legitimate industry and the people who are trying to help, and really helping the bad guys. I mean, I wish I could say, guys, just be honest, stop lying.
Right.
You know what I mean? But that doesn't happen, and you've got to think, right? So really, back in 2004, I think it was, right? PCI was created. When PCI was created, it said, you have to have a pen test effectively, but it didn't define what a pen test was. It certainly didn't define, and it still doesn't today, any level of realistic threat or how to assess that level of threat that the test should operate at, right? It just effectively says you need a pen test. I remember distinctly, back then, people were just starting up these security companies and they were selling vulnerability scans as penetration tests, and they were making a lot of money. So from a business side, as an entrepreneur, good for them, they took advantage of the opportunity, right? The problem that created, interestingly, that PCI really created, is it created this market for these really inexpensive and candidly ineffective solutions, right? People were buying this. That's what's plaguing us today. Right now, if you look at the industry, I mean, there are, as far as companies go that do what we do, I can probably count all of the companies that I really feel do a good job on one hand when it comes to offensive security services, right? There are very few that really do that. And when it comes down to the companies that sell software and technology, I can also count all of the ones, that I would recommend or that I think are viable on one hand. So it's two hands, I can count everything, right? And if you think about that in comparison to everything that actually exists today in the industry, it's kind of scary, and it shouldn't be that way. I think if we're going to be providing solutions, they really need to be solutions.
Yeah, you talked about putting people at greater risk. A lot of that too comes from not just ignoring problems, but if you've gained their trust, then they're going to even lower their defenses further. And therefore there is no redundancy to the efforts being applied to supposedly secure an infrastructure.
Yeah. That's exactly right. I mean, and there are all kinds of ways of measuring and knowing whether or not you're getting a quality service.
Right.
One of my favorites is, especially in our industry, vendors will promise to deliver, a high quality manual penetration test, because everybody uses the word manual now. A telltale way to know if they're going to deliver a manual test, though, is how they price. Right. So if you end up pricing based off of the number of IP addresses, for example, or the count of something, you can rest assured that that vendor is going to be delivering a service that is dependent on automation. And the reason is really obvious. In fact, it's so obvious that I don't think it's even noticeable until somebody says it, but every IP address does something different. So if you're going to be providing services that are truly manual, you can't say, hey, I've got 10 IPs, how much will it be? Oh, $5,000, $500 per IP. What happens if each one of those IPs requires 0 man-hours worth of work because they're offering 0 services, but they're responding to ICMP type 8? All of a sudden, you're spending $5,000 on nothing.
Right.
Inversely now, and this is where the problem comes into play, and we see this all the time. Inversely, what happens if you have those 10 IPs and each one requires 40 hours worth of work in here, right? You'd be working for an equivalent rate if you're billing $500 per IP of $12.50 an hour, which no pen testing vendor can do, right?
Yeah, of course.
So to compensate for that, if you're pricing that way, right, to compensate for that risk, of misgauging the workload, you have to be delivering a service that hinges largely on automation. And if you're delivering a service that hinges on automation, and you're using automation for even half of your vulnerability discovery, right, your service is going to be subpar when compared to the real threat.
Of course.
Because the real threat, right? I mean, when was the last time we heard about, bad guys running Nessus? They don't work that way. It's very different.
And who's willing to even concede the 20 to 40% of intrusions that won't be picked up by standard automation and capability?
Right. Yeah.
Of course, you further validate the value of we humans in the process. If you want, people to get into that AI discussion, and I'm all about it. It's great, technology enabler, but you can't dismiss the proactive, genuine penetration testing of which you speak.
Yeah, and I think I think that automation definitely has a place.
Sure.
But I don't think that it should replace.
Of course
people
not.
do.
Yeah. Now, have you heard much about something we've seen here in Colorado Springs? The Better Business Bureau is now working with, I think it's our Small Business Development Council, to provide a rating, a Better Business Bureau rating for cyber and cybersecurity stability. Do you think that a rating system of sorts could aid us in bringing to light sort of the less than honorable characters in the penetration services provision industry?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you look at at Gartner and their Magic Quadrants, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm continually seeing vendors there that deliver services and products that I just don't think are really particularly useful listed as the best vendors.
Right.
So if the rating system somehow measures the technical capabilities, or somehow measures or checks the capabilities of a firm versus what's actually happening in the real world, then maybe. Right. But I think to do it right, you have to have real technically sharp people behind it. Yeah. The problem with a lot of the rating systems that I've seen today is that they tend to be very politically oriented. Yeah. And that politically oriented kind of thing really produces poor results when it comes down to something as technical as what we're talking about.
Sure. And there's a lot of work involved here in vetting and getting to the core. I mean, because just think of the complexity of the discussion we've had to this point. How many people are even able or willing to do that level of analysis on a penetration service? They're hoping to be able to trust someone and just get it done. Yeah,
that's exactly right. I mean, they frankly they should be able to trust people.
Yes.
Done.
Oh yeah.
Right.
That is kind of what everything was based upon. I mean, that's what a fundamental keystone of society is. It should be.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Unfortunately, now it's. I mean, I almost feel like it's really people have started businesses and it's all about the bottom line and making money as opposed to actually delivering services that are going to be protective and doing the real thing.
Right. And living up to a standard. What keeps us from sliding into the Wild Wild West there?
I don't know.
I thought I'd try to ask the question another way and hope that maybe there was a magic solution, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I really don't know. I really have no idea.
I certainly think, a good number of my colleagues in this industry and, across the globe, I think if we kind of focus on this issue a bit with some sense of awareness, I know there's a good portion of us that would take some of this to heart and then, raise the standard ourselves, and at least lead by example inside our industry.
Yeah. And, I think that could be an approach. I mean, it's funny because I've actually thought about, trying to reach out to the other vendors that I think actually do a good job of building sort of a consortium or a pool of us and saying, okay, these are the standards that we promise to live by. These are the things that we promise to do. These are the things that we will not do. And operating at that level. And I've often wondered if we operate at that level and we set that sort of precedent, right? That sort of bar. Will our clients recognize that and value that? And just in my own experience, I mean, Netragard's been around since 2006, right? So just in my own experience, what I've recognized is that it's not just about the providers. There are clients also who just don't care about security. I mean, we have calls frequently from people and we'll ask them point blank, we'll be like, look, are you making your buy decision? You can only pick one. Are you making your buy decision on low cost? Are you making it because you have to satisfy some kind of requirement? Or are you making it because you want to improve security? And people are upfront. They say, well, cost, low cost, and it's pretty remarkable. And then, I'd say the rest will say, the good security, or the really high end of security. Right?
Sure.
But the low cost, I'd say, probably makes up, 80% of the market. So you have that problem, right? Then you have people selling that way. So,
well, and even if the objective is just to meet a requirement, I just need a check in the block so I can show my clients that I've thrown some money at this, and of course that's a dangerous precedent. Well, I tell you, you've got quite a passion for this, and I really would hope that this particular podcast gets a good play. Just given the import of the issue, and really we don't know exactly what the solution is yet, other than returning to a place of trust and integrity, not just in penetration services, but any kind of managed service capability inside the cybersecurity industry. Adriel, it's been a delight to have you with us, and I look forward to getting you to come on and continue this conversation if you're willing.
Sure, absolutely.
Outstanding. Well, it's been my pleasure to have our guest today. Adriel's had quite a history, as you've heard, with Netragard and also with SNO. But let me also say, if you're out there and you've heard this, keep one another accountable, and let's raise the standard in our industry. My name is Abe Thompson, coming to you from the SecureSet Studios here in Colorado Springs on the new Cyber Frontier. Good day.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember, please follow and participate as New Cyber Frontier is supporting a grassroots community effort to empower the individual in the digital age. Check it out at privacyforthepeople.org. Also, make sure to join our mailing list so we can keep you informed. If you have an idea, if you have a question you would like to hear answered, or if you just want to get involved in what we're doing, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors links because they are the ones that really make this show possible. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.